Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the American Center in Moscow's Game Changer Speaker Series. I'm your moderator, Josh. Tonight we'll be having a conversation called Inside the Ring. It's a conversation about wrestling, coaching, and leadership. I'm joined today by Cornell Robinson and Bryan Thompson, both wrestling coaches, wrestlers, people who have seen the impact that the sport can have both in the U.S. and abroad. So, very excited to welcome these two guests into the American Center Moscow. A bit about the topic that we'll be covering today. Wrestling is recognized as the world's oldest competitive sport. It's got a history reaching as far back as ancient Greece and Rome, and it continues to be popular in places like the US and, of course, Russia. While the rules and styles differ from region to region, the sport of wrestling is a common language connecting athletes and coaches from all backgrounds. So, as fans look ahead to the World Wrestling Championships this fall, and of course to the 2028 Olympic Games in Los Angeles, the sport becomes a really important tool for fostering cultural exchange. Uh, so, let's get it started with Bryan and Cornell. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourselves, starting with Bryan?
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Bryan Thompson, and I wear a variety of hats. I am the CEO and founder of Hammerhead Consulting Group, which primarily focuses on sports diplomacy around the world. I'm also a longtime varsity wrestling coach at a local high school here in the state of Maine, a freestyle coach, and I am a teacher. I teach global studies and economics to high school students. And so my work career is really one big crossover in which I can strengthen my skills and help clients and students and athletes in a variety of manner, or that a variety of skills in which I really have a passion in. And so I'm here tonight to kind of talk about those experiences and in part how wrestling has helped me and how wrestling and sport diplomacy can really help the world unite. So
Amazing.
pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking some time out of that start of the school year to talk with us today. Cornell.
Yeah, my name is Cornell Robinson. I myself, as well as a teacher, I'm a weight training coach. I also run right now a private wrestling club called Extreme Training, where the elite come and train with the elite. I'm also a podcaster. I do a podcast called The Money Round. I have a lot of wrestling guests on there from all over. So I try to reach out to as many wrestlers as I can across the world. And I also have been a probably 10 to 12 time USA World Team coach. And most recently, I was Great Britain's World Team coach here at the U20 Worlds and been training with them with their women's team. And so I do a lot of international coaching. That's kind of my main thing, and coaching across the world and definitely showing the love for wrestling and really giving kids the passion for that Olympic fuel that we have going on for 2028.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, thank you for taking some time out of the start of term. I know it's a really hectic time for teachers like yourselves. So, Coach Robinson, could you tell me a bit about some of your wrestling influences and maybe some highlights from your time as a competitive wrestler yourself?
Yes, I'll say, growing up, I kind of found wrestling through my brothers. We all started wrestling in high school. Mainly would have to be our high school coach, Coach Charlie Sherritt. He won several state titles here in Missouri. So that kind of started the passion for it. And the thing that I guess, drew me to wrestling was that you kind of controlled your own destiny a little bit. So I definitely loved that aspect of it. Sometimes you hated it, sometimes you loved it. But definitely, I think the most experience I got from wrestling uh, my freshman year. I'm going a real deep story here, but it's actually what drove me to becoming who I am. My dad was murdered at my freshman year, and my coach picked me up from the funeral and made me wrestle that day. And I knew if I can get through that, I can get through anything. So that's kind of been one of my main things that drove me into wrestling and to keep pushing.
That is so meaningful. Thank you for sharing that. Bryan, same question to you.
Yeah. I echo a lot of what Cornell just said. I started in the sport at a really young age. Growing up in central New York, wrestling is a hotbed there, high school wrestling and freestyle. But my most important influence was my father, who was a high school wrestler in lower Rockland County, New York, just north of New York City. And I've been fortunate, right? I've been fortunate my entire life to have really good, administrators in my life and mentors, but coaches early on were really important. Um, my high school coaches and some of my Pee Wee coaches or youth coaches, one of whom is Nick Perillo, was just inducted into the Springfield College Hall of Fame, a North Syracuse wrestler that we really looked up to, was really good with youth wrestlers, and then he went on to own at that time, I'm going to date myself, but a weightlifting gym that focused on the Nautilus system. And as wrestlers, we could work out there and really improve upon those things that I preach now as a coach, which is perseverance and doing the extra when no one's watching. I just had that conversation with students yesterday. Freshmen started for us. So, I always kind of quiz them on 10 things that require no talent, and that extra work and doing things when no one's watching are really two of those really important things. But those are coaches that really kind of stuck out for me and made an impression. And moving into high school, we had a really strong freestyle program called the Mohawk Valley Wrestling Club, headed up by Gene Mills, who was a world champ at the time and two-time NCAA champion. But Gene, if you know Gene, is a super charismatic, energetic clinician and coach, and at that time still competing. So, everything Gene did, we followed and we watched and we emulated and so forth. But it wasn't just Gene; it was another coach. His name is Jim Hall, a former All-American at Oklahoma University, and when he joined our high school and freestyle staff, he was still competing too. So as a young athlete and a young student athlete, watching the still active coach athletes compete and kind of live that lifestyle was really impactful to me, to the point where, we wanted to continue that. And I was fortunate to travel a little bit with the Mohawk Valley Wrestling Club. Certainly being in central New York, having easy connections with Canada and traveling across the border and hosting some of those teams back in central New York. Mohawk Valley was one of the first clubs to create an international tournament. And so we'd have high school visitors from all across the world come and compete at this event. And so that really was an eye-opener for me and kind of led me down this path.
With influences like that, it's no surprise that you both continue to be so passionate about wrestling and coaching and bringing it to the world. Now, in terms of bringing wrestling and your coaching to the world, could you, Coach Robinson, talk a bit about some of your recent travels? You just came back from Slovakia for the U20 World Championships. You've also been to some recent tournaments in Romania and Macedonia. What were those experiences like?
Yeah, Romania was one of my first ones so far, I guess, East, where it's just a regular tournament. And it was just a great experience. I mean, the people treat you so great, and it was just awesome to see the passion for wrestling. It was so much passion. It was a lot of fights there, actually, with some of the calls with the refs, but definitely a lot of passion for the sport in Romania. And it was a lot of different countries there competing. And, the age group of 20 and under it's different because they can still look like teenagers, but a lot of them now wrestle at the senior level now. I think even, in USA, that's a big push, but it's a big push across the world. So it's cool to see so many young athletes knowing that winning has no age limit. But Romania was definitely a good trip and a good eye opener. The best part about going to those tournaments for me, I get to see what the warm-ups and their approach to matches look like. I steal little techniques. It's hard to understand the philosophy, right, because of the language barrier. but wrestling is pretty universal when you start watching technique, and I can understand that aspect of it, and then I can really see how they approach matches sometimes physically, the coach and athlete. But so yeah, that's the main thing I picked up from Romania, and then I got to go to the U20 European Championships, which was another great experience, and I really realized how hot. And I kind of already knew the Europeans were probably the cream of the crop when it comes to the continental tournaments, but seeing it firsthand, the U20 European Championships could just as well, in ways, be as tough as the World Championships for some weight classes. But it was definitely an experience, and being that close to all the athletes in different countries and seeing how they approach matches and seeing how their fans love the sport. And you can go throughout the community and everybody knows wrestling. So it was, and that was in Macedonia, and that was pretty cool. And the last one was Slovakia, and UWW, United World Wrestling, did a good job of just making sure everybody had rides, everybody was taken care of, and people were treated well there and at the tournament. So definitely fun times and a good learning lesson. And, you know, a good thing too, growing up in America, I think sometimes you get or any country, but definitely America, you get an aspect or I don't know what word I'm looking for, but I guess a thing that you think the world is like. You may think that everybody's like America, and when you get to travel outside of the country, you see so many different things and see, you know, that what you can do and what anybody can do. So it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Do you have any, just to follow up on that, do you have any examples of what you experienced in Bratislava that sort of reinforced that feeling of, you know, the world is just so much more vast than how we might experience it in one region or another?
Yeah, you know, I'll say this. I don't know if I want to say it this way, but I think sometimes when you're in America, you may feel like these things are against you, and then you go to another country, it actually works better for you. I guess I'll say in a way, just like that. I think that's pretty cool, and you know, in some of those countries too, not all of them. I think you know, some of them have never seen a Black American, so it's pretty cool. The conversations I have with a lot of the kids on the team, and just like recently, I was with the Iran team on the bus, and me and the kids actually had a real good conversation and enjoyed the bus ride. And those two kids actually won the U20 world titles, actually, so it's pretty cool.
That's fascinating. Bryan, could you share a bit about your experience coaching in Thailand, actually? I know you both shared that time together, and you have some photos from that trip.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I met Coach Cornell. And this was in 2012. This was my first overseas trip as a coach. And the United States, USA Wrestling, has a really unique program called the Coach's Apprentice Program. And you apply through a pool, and they select candidates to join the I would say the official coaching staff for each team, whether it is a U20, which Cornell was talking about, or a U23, or in this case the Junior World. So these are athletes that are 19 to 23. Correct me if I'm wrong, Coach.
Yeah, that's basically the 20 and under now. So,
20
yeah.
and under. Yeah, so it's changed a little bit. But that trip was really an eye opener. And I can share some photos. When I travel, whenever I travel anywhere, particularly as a coach, I bring my camera. And, you know, I was able to capture a lot of images of how that tournament unfolded from the opening ceremonies to the end. And I like to use a lot of these photos in my class. As I mentioned, I run a consulting firm, partnered with a lot of other firms in the country that focuses on sports diplomacy. And when I'm teaching my students, sports diplomacy can be easily conveyed or illustrated to students through photos and then discussion. So I think we'll pull up those photos, and I can kind of give you an idea of some of the concepts that we're talking about and the experiences that Cornell and I shared while we were in Thailand. I have the tech pull up the photos. So you could see myself and Cornell there. But this first photo, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is really kind of you wouldn't know this without some commentary, but this is a great example of how the United States and USA Wrestling puts together a apprentice program of coaches from across the nation. There's Bill Mitchell from California in the back, and Mike Gorgona and Broughton Crateman as well, all from the West Coast. I represent the East Coast. There's one or two from the Midwest. And so this gives our coaching staff across the nation great representation in terms of learning not just the system and helping to coach kids overseas, but passing along knowledge down the chain into the smaller programs and what we call feeder programs as well. I think our nation does a really good job at that. But also, I'm going to echo Cornell a little bit here. When we're overseas, or when I'm overseas, and particularly during this tournament in Thailand, I'm absorbing everything. How other nations are warming up, how other athletes approach the sport, and it would be arrogant to say that the United States has got it all figured out. We do well on the international scene, but certainly other nations do it really well and approach the sport and the warm up and the mental or the mindset aspect of things in a whole different light. And sometimes that will translate into great respect, and results as well. But you can see as I start to scroll through some of these photos, the cultural element of this. I would say the grandeur and the spectacle that you would see in Olympic Games or an Olympic level event. This is a junior world tournament. You could tell that this meant a lot to the Thais to be able to put this on in Pattaya, which is a fairly large city on the coast, more of a kind of a tourist-driven international city. And these cultural elements stuck out to me in terms of how important wrestling is to them to be able to host this on the international stage. And I don't want to speak for Cornell, but I had never been to Asia for wrestling. I have been to Thailand a couple times, but certainly not to a tournament in Asia. And so this was pretty special. And you can see that a whole variety of nations were respected and represented there. They like to showcase at that time one of their national sports, or traditional sports, I should say, which is Muay Thai, and put on a demonstration prior to the start of the tournament, which really, helps us to understand the cultural elements that are kind of at play around the region or around the country of Thailand, beyond just we're weighing in, we're going to go prepare, we're going to compete in a tournament. I think it helps give athletes, particularly our U.S. athletes and any athlete from around the world, perspective, right? We want to make sure that, at least from a sports diplomatic or sports diplomacy kind of mindset, that you are understanding, or at least perhaps cognizant of the cultural elements within the country that you're visiting. And so this is a great photo in the warm-up area of the variety of different countries that are represented as coaches. Every one of those coaches is probably jockeying for a spot to see how someone warms up, or what leg they lead with, or how they shoot, and what their conditioning level is. So, Cornell and I, or at least I can speak for myself, I'm in there kind of in the pit trying to gain some insight or intel for our head coaches as well. There's a great shot of the king and queen. That's King Rama IX, who passed away in 2016. He was the longest sitting monarch at the time in the world, and obviously that has cultural importance at this tournament as well. Sportsmanship, that's Jesse Thelke, who has gone on to higher acclaim than the Junior World Tournament. shaking hands, which is really part of wrestling, that respect element. Shaking hands with the ref, shaking hands with the table judge, and then shaking hands with the opposing coaches. Here he is shaking hands with the coach from China. Some Russian athletes. This is former, or actually future European champ in 2019, Zoror Kabaloev, winning a junior world title at 60 kilos, I think, Cornell.
That was good.
Yeah. I wanted to call a few photographs of women's wrestling, and that's our head women's coach, Terry Steiner, at the time. And again, this is 2012, so he's been at the helm for a while, and he's had a lot of success. But it kind of gives you a snapshot of the intimate, I would say, nature of wrestling in terms of connection between coach and athlete. Right there in the warm-up area, probably going through the game plan and how they're going to approach each match and who's in the way next and so forth is vital to the U.S. effort. I'd be remiss not to include a big throw here.
Yeah.
4 clocks, right? USA and Iran, always competitive. This is a U.S. athlete, an Iranian athlete on the mat.
Patrick Downey.
Patrick Downey. Yeah, young Patrick Downey, who's gone on to All-American at Iowa State, I think, coach, and is competitive in the Real American Freestyle professional circuit at the moment. Also competed in multiple Olympic trials.
Yeah, he made a world team, I think, in 2019, maybe.
Got it.
Senior world team. Yes.
Yep. Joey Dance.
Joey Dance. Oh, wow. That's good.
Yeah. And one of the things that some viewers probably already know that FILA turned into the United World Wrestling Organization, and everything's changed in terms of the mat colors, the referees. You can see in the back of this picture, they're in ties. And I saw something recently. What's your favorite international referee outfit? And they're much more modern now. I can't imagine refereeing an entire day in a shirt and tie and jacket in some cases. There's our national coaching staff. I'm sorry for the back shots, but that's Brandon Slay, Olympic champion in 2000, and Bill Zadek. And
that's Earl Hall.
Yes, I'll go back.
Yeah, Earl Hall from USA, coaches at University of Virginia, I think, right now.
Indeed.
Bill Zadek.
Yep, there's Zadek. The women's tournament is run concurrently with the men's as well. This tournament, as Cornell can attest, generally these world level tournaments take an entire week, if not more, because they really like to showcase each style: freestyle, Greco-Roman, and women's freestyle. And so I wanted to call a few women's wrestling as well, because I think that's a young Sarah Hildebrand, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
On our end and the U.S. end of things, women's wrestling is the fastest growing high school sport for good reason. I've started a women's program at York High School. We're trying to get that off the ground this season, but this is the trend. This is a competitive sport, and we have medaled many times already. And this goes back as far as 2012. So, yeah. I had last cultural comment I'll make is that's the Russian national shirt, and I can tell a little story. Brahman Creighton was on that tour, and I'm not sure if Cornell, if you were involved, but one night in the hotel, we were in a high rise on the beach. He said to me, "Hey, Bryan, we got to get upstairs with our USA wrestling gear because I've met some Russians that want to trade some gear." And so I rushed up there, and this is commonplace, right, Coach?
Yeah.
Rushed up there and was able to trade off a compression, USA Wrestling compression shirt for one of those really nice Cyrillic polos. So I have one of those I'm proud of. But
Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. So anyway, I wanted to share those photos, not just as an answer to your question, Josh, about what was like in Thailand, but kind of as a larger message of how wrestling can be involved in diplomacy, and how it is that common language. Sport is a common language that we all speak across the world, and wrestling, as the oldest of all sports, certainly can be the conveyor of a lot of diplomacy. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
Absolutely. These are amazing photos. Really brings you right into the action. Um, Love that photo of the coaches of all the different countries, just as you said, jockeying to get a view of the warm ups, learning from each other, learning from different places. Um,
Yeah.
are there any examples? I'll go to Coach Robinson for this of, say, the specific techniques or the uh, warm ups, different styles that you picked up from international play or
Yeah.
international competition?
Yeah. So the one thing that stood out to me for this tournament, um, I was looking for a place to sit down. We're in the warm up area. And I'm going to go, after I learned this, I started using it at all the USA tournaments. So I'm looking for a warm up area. I couldn't find it. And there's a door and it was closed. And I opened it and I stumbled and fell when I opened it. And it was the Russian team. And they had their own warm up area. And they were all they had like blankets. They were laying down. They were kind of separated from all the other teams. And I found it very interesting. I'm like, why are they separated from everybody? And when you walked up into the stands, you can kind of look down in that room because it had no roof on it, so you can see inside the room. So I walked into the stands and I just kind of looked over in the room the whole time. And what I noticed was the Russian coaches, once their athlete was ready to wrestle, they would stay and talk to them the whole time from that room or rub their shoulders all the way until they stepped on the mat to compete. So when they knew it was their time to wrestle, they were rubbing their shoulders, rubbing their back, loosen them up, and they did it the whole time until it was time for them to wrestle. And I noticed USA did not do that at that point in time. And at that point in time, USA was not doing very well on the world stage. And that's one of the things that really stood out to me. So then when I came back to coach high school wrestling, I always make my team separate from the other teams. And when it's time for them to start getting close to warming up, I usually try to walk them down. It's kind of hard because the American kids want to be involved in everything, and the parents think they know a little better. But when I truly started doing that with the team, my success as a team really rose. And the mindset of each individual athlete was a lot more focused and more confident by the time they stepped on the mat. So that was one of the major things I picked up from going to that tournament. And on another short note, I think the head coach of Russia now, or at least the one, Jordan Burroughs, is about to wrestle at RAF. Jordan Burroughs is going to wrestle. He's Sejalayev's coach. He was at this tournament and he won. And I also have a picture with him, and he wanted to buy my USA gear. So I can't pronounce his name right. I would say it, but he's actually wrestling Jordan Burroughs in RAF, and he's Sejalayev's coach for international wrestling as well.
What an interesting insight. I mean, it goes to show how much the mental game that the sport is too, right? The affirmations from the coach before getting ready to go on the mat. Well, this has certainly been a really engaging slideshow. Really enjoyed these photos, and one of the themes that this has brought up is just the enthusiasm so many countries from around the world have for the sport. Now, bringing it back to the U.S., maybe this will change with the 2028 Olympics and wrestling being a headlining sport. But as far as we understand it now, the sport's not so popular as some of the other team sports, even some of the other individual competitions. How does the U.S. sort of start to pick up some of the cultural interest in wrestling, especially as we lead up to 2028? Are there any insights that you can pick up, especially like you said with the Russian teams, are there any insights you can pick up from regions like Russia or the Caucasus that really dive headfirst into the sport? Let's go to Bryan for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have near the international experience that Cornell does with coaching and preparing athletes at that stage, but I am a student of the sport and I follow those athletes closely, and I follow a lot of podcasts and other things coming onto into streams. But I think to answer that question, you have to take a look at the way in which Cornell was just describing. The way that they prepare their teams is so much different than the American style, and you could actually translate that to all sports or a lot of sports across the world. The United States obviously are professional leagues, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball. We tend to dominate in sports that we have an origin in, and wrestling is not that. Is not the origin here, right? It's not the origin sport. We are really good. We do have our own folk style system that's both at the collegiate level and the high school level. And kids start at a young age. There is dedicated clubs, obviously. Cornell owns one. I run a wrestling club as well. But it is ingrained in society in places like Russia and Eastern Europe and in other parts of the world where, from a very, very young age, it is the same system, it is the same basics. And you could make that case for the United States too, but it's different. And it is, I would say it's a cultural, a cultural theme, right? We teach about cultural themes in school, and those seven elements of culture that are really, really important that define a civilization. But in the case of Russia and the Caucasus and some other places that come to mind, wrestling is the recreation, I would say, from a very, very young age. And American kids probably aren't getting that same type of recreation outlet. So, and Cornell, I'll let you kind of comment on that, but that's the difference. And I think based on Cornell's story, we're starting to emulate that, and we're starting to model some of those techniques in terms of preparation and mindset. And one thing that comes to mind, and it might have been Jordan Burroughs that told me, but in all my coaching training and going through the USA Wrestling system, someone told me that you have a 10-year window of time when you are really competitive in wrestling, and it really makes a difference in terms of when you want to burn that window. And so to be highly active competitively when you're at such a young age tends to burn that window quicker for our kids. Now, that being said, I also am cognizant of what Cornell said. We are having unprecedented success at younger ages on the age group circuit. So our U20 team is comprised of some superstars. Bo Bassett, he's one of those special talents, once in a generation. But we're seeing more of those at a younger age. So is that a crossover of we're embracing that system, the systems from overseas, and perhaps we're bypassing or somehow supercharging that burnout factor? But I think that makes the difference, is modeling what we've seen overseas in a different way.
Do you think that the introduction of women's wrestling as an NCAA, a Division I college championship sport, the developments in the NCAA as a whole, will have anything to do with bringing wrestling up in the U.S.?
Absolutely. I'll let Cornell comment on that as well. But the NCAA D1 tournament, all D1, D2, D3, they're sold out every year, well in advance. It's a spectacle. I've been to numerous Division I tournaments, NCAA Division I tournaments. It is one of ESPN's most popular and most watched events during that weekend, from Thursday to Saturday night when they conclude the finals. So adding the women's tournament to that slate can only boost the sport. The women on my team and the teams that I've coached really foster that excitement around the sport. Up until the last couple of years, at least in the state of Maine, women and girls have wrestled with boys teams in the high school division and have done very well, but they've always been deserving of their own shot, their own tournament, their own. And for our region, the New England Championships is about 2 years old for women, and that has only added to the excitement and, frankly, the revenue of that tournament.
We had Sally Roberts on recently.
Oh yeah.
She spoke about the process of getting women's wrestling into that tier of Division One championship sports, and that was a really interesting conversation. So glad to have followed up on that here a bit. Now going over to you, Coach Robinson, could you talk a bit about your perceptions of the wrestling culture in places like Russia and the Caucasus, and do we import that? Is there a way to import that kind of cultural importance to the U.S., or is there a different way we have to go about it here?
Yeah, so interesting. I think I don't want to use a cliche word, but I think it's kind of just a way of life, a way of living for kids in the Eastern culture. Like, grandpa wrestled, it's all in your family. It's part of the schools or clubs you go to. You can't get away from it. I think here in the United States, it's the mentality of it is starting to change. I think the reason why we had so much burnout early, because I think we didn't fall in love with the sport. We more fell in love with cutting the weight, getting down, trying to work out as hard as you can, see how many people can puke during practice. That type of mentality is what was built on. Like here where I'm at in Missouri, that was definitely a mentality of how hard can you outwork somebody. Not much as how hard can we get kids to love the sport, how good can we make them technically and tactically. And then, of course, when they get older, they might have to start cutting weight. It's one thing. I think United States does have a good thing as well because of the colleges and, the women's wrestling in colleges. If you don't make a world team and don't get to travel internationally, you still get to experience wrestling at a high level, wrestling in these universities. So that's a pretty cool thing as well. So I think, with that, we do have a thing where kids, hey, I didn't make a world team, but I won a national title for my school. And I think some countries get to miss out on that aspect because all they get to shoot for is making a world team for that country. So, and it gives them a lot of practice, but definitely I think that's the culture. I think at one point in time, especially around the trip to Thailand around 2012, 2011, and 2010 and under, it was probably more important to wrestle for your college. And you were more known for wrestling for your college than you would making a world team. Now, I think it's a little bit of both. Now, I think it's a little bit more exposure with all the social media and flow wrestling and all the coverage you get now.
Coach Robinson, could you actually, staying on that topic a bit, could you illuminate what the pathway looks like for a young athlete right now who might be deciding whether or not to pursue wrestling at an elite level in the U.S.? How does that look different than it perhaps did when you were younger, or from pathways outside the U.S.?
Yeah, I say when I was younger, I never heard of a world team or world experience. It was always about winning the state title, maybe winning the team title for our coach because our coach had won so many. And then, I will say this, and I don't want to really bash our coach, but wrestling was so hard, and, they would lock the door. The room temperature was turned up to 101 degrees, and, you about died walking out of there. At least it felt like you were dying. I was like, if college wrestling is like this, I don't want to do it. So it, it felt so hard that you may not have wanted to do it, even though you loved it and loved winning. But then, when you wrestled in college or you got to see some of the college practice, I was like, this is a little bit more easier than my high school practice. So, but I definitely think that the college and the American mindset were all about the state titles and wrestling in college and winning national titles. Now I have 10-year-olds now who want to become a world champ right away. But I've also coached a 9-year-old, Luke Littledahl, when he started at 9 and 10 years old, and he's the most decorated youth American freestyle male we've ever had in the United States. And I had him since 9 years old because he was introduced to all my experiences from overseas, and I brought it to him. He was one of the students, and his parents really bought in to the cultural aspect of wrestling and learning how to love it as well. And his dad was already a coach as well and then involved in USA wrestling program, but they really brought into the freestyle aspect of wrestling.
That's such
Josh,
a.
I think one of the really underserved or unknown U.S. advantage that we have now is the rise of the Division II and III programs that are partnering with academic programs to really give opportunities to our wrestlers. I have a girl who is going to be a senior at the University of Northern Michigan in the nursing program, and that's a freestyle program like all of the collegiate women's programs are. And she probably wouldn't have had that opportunity had she not decided to pair both nursing in that field, that kind of pre-medical field, with a wrestling opportunity as well. So, kind of echo what Cornell is saying. I think having a passion for wrestling really, not only helps you to achieve at the high school level, but once you get to that collegiate level and there is an opportunity, things do become easier in terms of, for the coach and for the staff, a little bit in terms of the practice level and so forth. These individuals, both women and men, they're involved in so many regional training centers and programs across the year that they're really dialed in. But also they're getting, in most cases, in a lot of cases, a first-rate collegiate education as well, which is kind of the backbone of our society.
It's so interesting that there are all these different regional experiences with the sport as well. We just spent a lot of the last half hour or so talking about differences country to country, but even in the U.S., it changes so much. I mean, hearing Coach Robinson's experience of getting shut in during his time in high school versus what other people might have experienced elsewhere in different parts of the country, or the different styles that they learned. I think that is an additional level to this sport as a connector that I'd love to explore more. On that note, Bryan, I know you were involved in a cultural exchange between wrestlers from Maine and Nebraska. Would you mind sharing a bit about what drove that and some of the outcomes?
Absolutely, and I see we have a question too. Why is wrestling particularly effective for cultural exchange? And so the Maine Nebraska, it's titled the Cultural Wrestling Exchange. It just finished up its 42nd year this summer. It started in 1984. Two coaches, Wally LaFountain from Winslow, Maine, and Tom McCann from Kearney, Nebraska, met at a national tournament and decided, let's put together an exchange between two different states of, just vastly different geographies and economics and social systems as well. And so that's really flourished. But how is it a cultural exchange? So using wrestling is kind of that universal language. I would say for most of the exchange, Nebraska has dominated. Wrestling is bigger in Nebraska. Maine has held its own, and the sport has grown immensely in the last decade or 15 years. But that being said, when we send a team there, and then the opposite years they send a team here, they really get to see what life is like on the coast of Maine, where the industries are lobstering and paper industries up north, and blueberry and potato industries. And obviously in Nebraska, corn is king, right? So when I've been on those tours, and it's been a number of years, the early 2000s were really my years there, where I hosted either a Nebraska team or I went there. You get to see things that are important culturally to the towns you're in. And so when we go or they come here, they generally wrestle 4 big dual meets between Team Nebraska and Team Maine, with an all-star roster of local kids. But the important thing is, when we're there, we get to see some of the things that you would never lay eyes on here in the state of Maine. And I can recall going to a Cargill meatpacking plant, which sounds like a really benign, boring trip, but it was an eye-opener to our kids from Maine, because of not just the sheer size of these operations, but this is the source of the beef in our country. And Maine kids are not going to see that. They're not going to understand how that is an integral part of the Nebraska economy. And so that's one element. But also, what are the shared kind of not just cultural but societal themes do we have in common, and perhaps which are different, right? And so, when we're living in the times where things are very politicized and social media kind of shapes the conversation and so forth, it's really important to get athletes face to face, right? And particularly high school athletes. And we've added a separate women's exchange 3 years ago, and they don't just pair with the boys; they go in separate directions. So we sent the girls team there this year, and the team Nebraska came here to Maine. So it's a separate exchange. It's not just an add-on. They're doing their own thing. And when you relate that to the world, I think it's the themes are the same, right? You're learning about life, and what's important to a local population. What are some of the themes, or I guess the mores and even taboos that are different than what you've experienced at home. If you haven't stepped outside your state, your town, your community, it's really hard for you to have empathy, right? Or any sort of cultural knowledge about what's going on, which ultimately leads to being a better competitor, right? Or a better leader, or someone with a little bit more grit and understanding. So that's the Maine Nebraska exchange, and it's been replicated in other states, but we're proud of the fact that we're the longest running one.
Thanks for detailing that. That sounds certainly like exactly what we've been talking about, sharing those same values, but across different settings. Certainly never spent that much time out in Maine, so getting to see the industry there, like you said, of lobstering, whatever, I'm sure that would change a lot of my views as well.
Yeah, our secret always is to fill them up with lobster and put them on the beach all day, and then have the dual meat.
That I can see why you might do well on.
Yeah.
So we have a couple more questions to get through from the audience, and I want to tie this into your personal coaching experience and your coaching philosophy. So we've got 2 here. How do you help athletes respond to losing, and when does competition become too much for young athletes? And then how do you balance individual achievement with being part of a team? If you could wrap that up into just your overall approach to coaching, I would love to hear that. Let's start with Coach Robinson.
Yeah, I think those good questions. What was the last question about personal achievement, balancing with the team? I think, I always want an individual to shoot for their individual goals. And hopefully, as long as they're meeting their individual goals, it usually coincides with the team. The last school that I coached at, it was pretty hard with that because we had so many teenage superstars and parents that it was hard to juggle some of that and still meet everybody's goals. But we were able to do it. But it's always a fun thing when you can reach that. And as far as losing, that teaching an athlete to handle losing is definitely understand it's always a learning process. You either win or you learn. But as soon as I feel when our athlete loses and they immediately or give them, after they calm down, they ask, hey, what did I do wrong in this situation? That's when I know I can really help them progress. But if an athlete never really asks that question, like, what did I do wrong in this situation, or how could I have done this situation differently? I think I never get them to excel. Once they ask that question, then I know they start to hit another level. And it's not that it's not personal; they're still taking it personal, but they're leaving the bitterness kind of out of it, and they want to get better at the skill, which and see wrestling more as a chess match. Then I really think they start getting to another level when they're able to ask that question. And we as coaches, we always bring it to them, which is good. But I think when the athletes ask, that's when they're taking ownership of it. So it's pretty good. And what was the first question again that I want to tie in there?
That's when does how do you help athletes respond to losing, but then also when does the competitive side become too much for a young athlete?
Yeah. I think I think it's always a individual based thing. I think sometimes here in America, 8 and 9 year olds and even 7 and 6 year olds compete a lot, probably too much. I think once you get 13 to 12, maybe you can compete. And here in America, like we keep score on everything and trying to be a competitor. I think some kids just, that feeling of losing and feeling like they failed is too much for younger kids and some high school kids, right? They throw temper tantrums, and you have to be able to like I said, once they get past that temper tantrum phase, you can really get them good. I think I was kind of always in that temper tantrum phase, and even now as a coach, you always get mad. But once you're able to go back and watch film and really dissect the situation, I think you always get better from it.
Sounds like the navigation of the competitive side, all those emotions, but balancing it with thought and learning. That's part of what makes wrestling such a good tool for developing leadership.
Yes.
If we could go to Bryan on that same topic, how do you
Yeah.
pull those leadership traits out of your kids?
That's a tricky process, but wrestling is hard, and you can't sugarcoat that, right? I teach at a high school that has around 500 kids. That's not a big high school at all, and I don't have the luxury, and none of us have the luxury of burning any kid out. So, but at the end of the day, it's really not about the wins and losses as much as it is building those leadership capacities for later on in life, taking those lessons of wrestling, perseverance, grit, determination, discipline, even empathy and kindness, right, or respect for your opponent, and taking that into your working life. We like to tell kids of any skill level that comes out for the team, you're going to leave here with the skill set that's going to make you successful later in life, whether that be immediately in college, or if you've entered a military service, or you are going off into the working world or starting your own business. Wrestling, teaches you to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get back to work. And so for us, it really doesn't matter how talented you are, because I've had I currently have a team coming up that's loaded with seniors, and some of them are superstars, and some of them are journeymen, right? They're there for the right reasons for any sport, right? Which is, I'm there to make friends and be part of a team that works really hard, and that's how we bill it. Is if you're interested in working harder than you ever have in any sport you've ever participated in, this is your opportunity. And decidedly, our numbers are lower. Wrestling, we're talking about a combat sport ultimately, and the competition is fierce, even at the varsity level, super fierce. But if we can, and it's about leadership, right? So it's amazing how you take a freshman who may have only had a year or two of middle school wrestling under their belt, and suddenly they are vying for a captainship by junior or senior year. And to see that growth for year after year, and I'm entering my 30th year of varsity coaching, so I've seen it many, many times, is really remarkable and refreshing, and that's why it keeps me going. As far as competition, to answer that question, I think it can be too much for some kids, and sometimes I'll have kids that come out for the team that say, listen, I don't really want to wrestle off for a spot I'm great being on JV, and sometimes it is about I don't really want to compete at all, but I am going to sign that contract. I'm going to be at every practice. I'm going to work my butt off because I want to be part of this thing, this program that's successful. So that's kind of answering. I see a question that says how and why do I stay involved in the sport? That's it right there. That's the hook, is watching kids mature into really successful adults. And I'm hoping I'm going to echo Cornell here. The greatest thing as a coach is when you get a call later in life from one of your former athletes, who says, started a family, I'm successful in this. Or second best is when a call comes in for a reference, and it's been many, many years, and someone's looking for a reference for one of your wrestlers. That's special, and that's why I keep going.
That's really rewarding. Let's see. We've got time for a little bit more. Well, I guess staying on the theme, what has wrestling taught you personally, yourself, that you could not have learned anywhere else? Let's go to Coach Robinson.
Yeah, I kind of, stated a little bit at earlier the experience that I had with my father being murdered, and it really just taught me to count on myself. No matter how tough a situation may be or good a situation may be, you're never too high, never too low, and you can kind of get through anything. You can make it in life if you just believe in yourself. So that's the really thing that wrestling has taught me individually, and I hope that when I coach kids, I hope I instill the same thing in them. Right now I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of kids who I have coached, and they are coaches now. I get to see them, like Coach said, have their families and instill that same belief in the kids they coach.
It's beautiful.
I echo that as well, Josh. Obviously we've been talking about perseverance and discipline, but I think one of the things that is maybe littler known or lesser known, that wrestlers often experience, is the fact that wrestling has taught me to work in the shadows. Right? Wrestling is not a high revenue sport at the present. It's growing, but it's not on the level of our professional sports. Not many participants are going to be Division I coaches or coaches at that level at all. But what are you going to be? You're going to be working, a lot in the trenches in terms of building something. That might be a career in education. It might be your own business. It might be working on a family and raising your own kids. But what wrestling has taught me is to be willing to work even when you're unrecognized, right? And to respect others around you that may be going through something rough or difficult, or their own journey that's happening, and they're working through it too. Wrestlers are tough. They're gritty. They're determined. Cornell was talking about all the things you have to do just to be ready to wrestle, to step on the mat, which is unique to wrestling, that other sports don't have to contend with. Just to make the weight class is the battle before the battle, to quote different people. But that's what it taught me, was to be willing to put the work in without any recognition, and to be satisfied with the results based on that work.
Okay, final question for both of you, starting with Cornell. What is one trend and one rising wrestler, whether from the U.S. or abroad, to keep an eye out?
One trend is cut off sweatpants now. I think everybody wear the longer sweatpants. They used to tuck them into their socks, so now I think they cut off the sweatpants now. A rising wrestler, man, it's a lot of them, but I think just coming off of the U20 championships, I would say Michael Boyle, who won the world title at I want to say 92 kilograms at U20. I think he's definitely on the uprise. And another one I will say is Araya Mills from Georgia. He wrestled. He's a U17 world champ from last year, but he didn't wrestle this year because he was hurt.
Bryan?
Yeah, I've seen the cutoff sweatpants too, and maybe we're a little bit behind here, but wearing singlets in practice is really kind of a trend I've seen quite a bit. Going with customized gear from various outlets that's customized to their style. Those are all things that never existed when I was a competitive wrestler. I think social media, podcasts, and following individual wrestlers it may not be a brand new trend, but it certainly is a really huge trend with my wrestlers within the last 5 or 6 years. They're more knowledgeable. Elite kids have always been that way, but your garden variety high school wrestler never was and is now. So that when you're in practice and you're talking about a John Smith low single, they know who John Smith is for the first time in my career. And that's across the board. So social media has helped us there, podcasting and streaming services, whether it's Flow Wrestling. These kids all have accounts, and they're able to access those things and watch video and watch technique. And that's been a trend for the last decade, but I think it's only growing and becoming more accessible to kids. So,
yeah, I would definitely say one other thing you said about what are kids knowing. Kids who never wrestled always know where Dagestan is now. They're
that's
like,
right.
go to Dagestan to learn wrestling. The kids know that now.
And that's the influence of MMA as well. The crossover between wrestling and MMA is well documented, and wrestlers tend to dominate the sport, but they do know. And that's a geography thing. So, for a lot of kids that normally wouldn't really care or have an interest in where that is, they now know where these places are and can find them on a map, which is remarkable.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
kids in the U.S. need to learn their geography a little better. And one wrestler up and coming that you would keep an eye on, Bryan.
I'm going with Luke Lillendahl, not up and coming, but that's Coach's guy, and I've been watching him for a long time, and I'm excited for this guy to win a medal at the Olympics in 28. So, the wrestling community is really focused on the lead up to the LA Games. The Olympic trials is something special to go to, and I'm going to try and get my butt to that. But I think the U.S. team is poised for a big medal finish in 28 in LA.
Fantastic. I'm certainly looking forward to that in the future. Cornell and Bryan, thank you guys so much for all the insight you shared. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did too. To everybody in Moscow, thank you for tuning in. We'll have another Game Changers event later this month on the 22nd. That'll be focusing on American football. I'm sure a lot of people know the National Football League season is just about to start, and that's going to be what American sports fans are focusing on for the next number of months through the fall and winter. So please keep your eye out for when that event is posted. We'll have some great speakers, some ex-NFL talent. So make sure to tune in. On behalf of Cornell, on behalf of Bryan, I'm Josh for the American Center in Moscow. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.